Hello and welcome to History Bubble. Today we'll be looking at the history of Argentina. There were many hunter and gatherer tribes, and a few agricultural ones, when the Portuguese first came to the region we now know as Argentina. A few decades later, the Spanish started the first settlement in the area, in modern-day Buenos Aires. While this settlement was abandoned, another one was soon established, which became modern-day Buenos Aires. The Spanish continued settling northern Argentina around the Rio de la Plata basin, and the area became part of the larger Viceroyalty of Peru. But the area of Argentina did not grow that fast, since all trade in the area had first go to Lima and not for the Europeans closer Rio de la Plata of Argentina, which made illegal trade a common thing in the region. But all of this changed when Argentina, along with modern Paraguay, Uruguay and southern Bolivia, became their own colony, the Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata. This made the region have high economical growth, since many of the Spanish trade ships would now stop in Buenos Aires instead of Lima to trade because it was closer. But they were only allowed to trade with Spanish and not the other European powers. Later, in a war between Spain and the British Empire, the British attacked Buenos Aires and Montevideo, which is the capital of Uruguay, after having defeated the Spanish fleet. Both of the cities was captured, but later liberated by an army controlled by Santiago de Liniers. But the situation in Spain worsened, with Napoleon attacking Spain and dethroned the Spanish king. This left Spanish America with the question of who should lead them. Would it be Joseph Bonaparte, who was the appointed king of Spain by Napoleon when he had conquered France? Or would it be the regency in Cadiz, who claimed to be regents for Ferdinand VII, the king of Spain? One last option would be that they would form the new government and control themselves, which they choose. So they formed their own government, often called the Primera Junta, a council of sorts. They invited other cities of the Viceroyalty to send members to represent them in the Junta, and when they came, the government started to be called the Junta Grande. Most cities in Argentina saw a divide between patriots and royalists. Both sides saw Ferdinand VII as the leader of the Viceroyalty, but the dispute was who would take his place while he was exiled. The royalists thought that the council in Spain would be the ones to take power, but the patriots thought that a council should be formed in the Viceroyalty to lead the region. The Spanish council called Buenos Aires a rogue city and moved the capital of Rio de la Plata to Montevideo. The Junta Grande soon started military campaigns and formed the United Provinces of Rio de la Plata. At Cordoba, Santiago de Liniers, a royalist, started to prepare a counter-revolution and built an army to try to stop the patriots from taking the city. But when the patriots came, Santiago's army deserted him, and he was later captured and executed, and Cordoba started supporting the Junta Grande. After gaining control of most of modern-day northern Argentina, the United Provinces of Rio de la Plata started invading Paraguay, Uruguay, and Upper Peru, or what is now Bolivia. In the Paraguayan campaign, Rio de Plata were initially successful, but were later driven out of Paraguay and cut all ties with them, and a few months later Paraguay declared their independence from Spain and got it. In Bolivia, a similar thing happened, with Rio de Plata first capturing a lot of the region, but later being driven out. In Uruguay, though the patriots were successful and captured Montevideo, but only for a while. The leader of the Junta Grande became largely unpopular after all these defeats, and started to lead an army to prove his worth. But when he did this, a new power took over, the United Provinces of Rio de la Plata, called the First Triumvirate. But this new government was also disliked by many, and a minor revolution happened, where large riots were supposed to distract the Triumvirate, while a group of men led by José de San Martin would depose the government. This revolution was successful, and the Second Triumvirate was established. During this time, the Royalists turned to the offensive from Bolivia and attacked northwestern Argentina, but after a few battles, the Triumvirate had driven the Royalists back to Bolivia. Another Royalist groups had also formed in Montevideo, so the Triumvirate sent forces to recapture the city for the Patriots. The Royalists marched out to face the Patriots, but were defeated and driven back to the city, which was soon besieged. But the city had the advantage of Spanish naval superiority, and thus the Spanish could easily resupply the city, which made the siege fairly hard. This and other things made the Triumvirate build a naval fleet, and 2 years later it was finished. This fleet won a large naval battle against the Spanish and drove them out of the region, and so they could capture Montevideo. Now, with the Patriots having captured Montevideo, the Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata was disbanded, but they still had to face the Viceroyalty of Peru, so they started to march on Bolivia once again. But once again, they lost. But they at least stopped the Royalists from coming into their territory. But King Ferdinand of Spain had now reclaimed the throne, and the Patriots now had to make the decision to swear fealty to the king or proclaim their independence. They chose the latter and became the United Provinces of Rio de la Plata. When the second Bolivia campaign failed, the commander San Martin chose to instead focus on dividing the rest of the Spanish-controlled South America from Chile instead and formed the Army of the Andes. This army crossed the Andes and defeated the Spanish in Santiago and captured the city. When they were there, they urged the Chileans to hold a referendum about independence, which they did, and so Chile proclaimed their independence. But the Royalists still controlled the south, but with Chilean help, the Argentinians crushed them. But on the way back, the Royalists made a surprise attack, defeating the joint army of Rio de la Plata and Chile and wounding Chile's leader. But after winning another battle and driving out the Spanish from Chile, Rio de la Plata withdrew from the war and stopped fighting Spain, and now the Argentine War for Independence was over. Chile continued to fight against Spanish Peru for a while, but that also soon ended. Argentina now had a new problem to look over, and that was the problem of a civil war. But that and much more I will talk about in the next episode of History Bubble. See you then!